Please welcome to the stage Vice President of U.S. Content and Executive Editor at CRN, Jennifer Follett.
Good morning. Good morning. Keep those phones handy if you wouldn't mind, because we've got another Slido question for you. We would like to know, please, what year did you first get your channel job? Your first channel job. What year was your first channel job? Mine was 1997, because that is when I joined CRN. And my esteemed colleague, Steve Burke, when was yours?
Many years, 35 years, but been in the IT industry for 40, so longer than I'd like to admit, but I've loved every minute of it. And I gotta say, it's really been an honor to be part of the CRN channel story.
I see a lot here in the 2000s, 1986, I see some older folk. Looking pretty good, a pretty good spread.
Experience.
Yes, experience. I'm in the experience bucket, Donna, come on. So CRN itself, born June 7th, 1982, and that's what we're here to celebrate today with this esteemed panel, so let's get going. I'm gonna ask my friends here to my left to please introduce themselves, including what your first job in the channel was.
So Blaine Radden, my first job at the channel was with the PC company in IBM back in 1991.
Thank you. Mike.
Michael Goldstein, let's see, I will say 1990, and I was at a 3-person VAR.
Donna.
Donna Gurgin. It was 1989, and I worked for a distributor, and I was a marketing administrator, and I handed out T-shirts to sales reps.
Jason Wright, CEO, Avatar Computer Solutions. My first channel job was roughly 2004. I was slinging PBXs for Wiltel, which then got spun off, became Nextera One. And if I could just say, Blaine, are you the lead singer for the Bee Gees there, or what? that's pretty awesome.
Thanks there, Jason.
First job covering the channel in '83, but of course, my official start, I consider it CRN 33 years ago.
Excellent. So maybe we can just start by talking about the biggest difference you see between what the channel was when you first started in it versus what it is today. You want to start that one, Blaine?
Yeah, I think one of the things that's changed over the years is back in the early 90s, 80s, it was really an extension of the vendor. So you were a Novell VAR, an IBM VAR, a Compaq VAR. That kind of evolved over time, and it went to, you became kind of a technology-oriented, practice-oriented. And now what I see today is it's all about your customer. You know, what customers do you serve? What industries do you serve? So that evolution's been a really important change in the business.
Yeah.
And I'll say, I think it was a lot easier back then when things were a lot more linear. So it was like there was a vendor, there was a distributor, there was a reseller, and there was a customer. And I would say probably the biggest change in today's world is customers can be vendors, vendors can be customers, you know, every partner is a service provider. I mean, I think the world has changed in that it's not linear, and it truly is a partner ecosystem is required in order to support customers today.
And I think also that back when I started, it was all about the numbers. It was how much could you buy, how much could you sell, you know, what are you gonna do for me lately, in the vendor's approach. You know, now I feel like it's more of a relationship. You know, it's a model that we have to go out there, and we really wanna make sure that we do service the customer and the customers first.
Yeah, I've seen a number of key paradigm shifts in terms of the way we go to market. We've seen a shift away from the CapEx model more towards a consumption model. We've seen the IT budgets move away from IT and into the line of business sectors. We've seen IT leaders not come from a technical background, and those are the people making decisions around our solutions. So, you know, for us, I've seen in the channel companies really been a dynamic partner in this. They've helped us, all of us here in the audience, really ascend to really the peak or the pyramid of the trusted advisor spectrum for our clients, right? Our clients have attorneys, and they have accountants, and they have insurance agents, and they have executive advisors and coaches. But if you think about it now, when trouble impacts their business, oftentimes we're their first call, and I'm proud of that. And thank you to the channel company.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk about us a little more. For those of you who don't know, I hope you all do know, crn.com is our website. We have a magazine. I hope you're all daily readers and receive the magazine. Our whole mission, I think Steve will back me up on this, I think I said it in the video, is to make sure that we're every day telling stories you can't read anywhere else that get to the heart of the matter of what it means for the people in this room. So I hope that some of you maybe here could share a story or an anecdote about how CRN has played a role or helped in your success in the channel.
I will say with that, I came from a law firm environment, and we read the typical PC Week, all those type of pieces. When I became a VAR, I remembered that the first time that I saw VAR Business and looked at that, I was like, oh my God, they're talking to me. It's not just about reviews, it's about things that really affect me and affect how I'm going to do business. Evolving now, it's an everyday occurrence of, looking on there, events like this. I mean, you guys have been innovators in this channel relationship for me at least, and I think for a lot of people out in the audience.
I was a vendor for 25 years before I came here and a customer of the channel company. And you literally didn't walk into your solution provider's office without reading the CRN, because you knew they were going to get it, they were going to read it, and you could be asked anything in there. So that was really the way you got caught up back in the day. You had to be fluent in what was going on.
I think some of the things that still apply to this day is, so I was 15 years in distribution, and distributors have unfortunately work on very low margins, right? And so one of the challenges is trying to keep up with everything going on in the vendor community that impacts them, the partner community that impacts them. And so I think I remember how important CRN was for me in keeping up on what was happening in the market, what shifts were happening, so that we could really look at the business, how we're going to change the business models or what have you in order to protect our margins, quite honestly. And so I think about it today in terms of CRN and how critical it is for me to look at what's happening in the market. Number one, how's our company doing relative to our competitors? Are we outpacing them? Are we staying up to date? And I think what CRN has always helped me do is really gain those insights and really start to question myself, and am I doing the right things in my role or the company, and really know what's top of mind with solution providers and managed service providers. So I can tell you it's a Bible. So.
Yeah, I want to add to that. It's a good point, Donna. So CRN's really been a catalyst in terms of bringing alignment, I think, to the channel and really bridging the gap between the supplier community and the service provider community. And when you think about the supplier community, they're largely driven by sales velocity, right? And that's largely driven by analyst sentiment, right? A lot of them are public companies or at least trying to get to an IPO status. You think about service provider community, and most of us in this room, it's really about service delivery and execution, and we were far from aligned in the early days as far as that goes. And so when you think about, and this is really for the new people in the room, and what value can I take away from this conference, when you think of all the touch points you have at an exchange, at a next-gen conference, at Best of Breed, right? You start thinking about the vendor expos and the boardrooms where you're hearing about their go-to-market strategies, you're hearing about their partner programs and learning about the company. And then you think about the solutions pavilion, and you think about the private demo rooms where you can really deep dive on the technology, right? And then you shift over to the private dinners. You think about all the parties and the way we've built community and camaraderie. And, some things never change. People still do business with people they like. And 99.99% of the relationships I have in my business were garnered at these conferences. And so that's really what it's been about. This is what we try to do in our business, is build community with our customers. And this is what CRN and the channel company have done a swimming job of, is building community. So kudos to you guys.
And I just want to add one more piece just to say that, my first interaction, with Steve Burke out there, didn't realize how important it was to see you as a VAR or you as a managed service provider in one of those articles. and draw the attention of the manufacturers out there. So, I answer the phone all the time when the reporters call, and, I have vendors that contacted me that might not have ever contacted me because whether it was a Burke thing or see CJ out there, or, it's really important to go out there and see your name in lights so that the vendors know who you are.
What about when you look back over the development of the channel, what channel executive or executives might you point to as ones that you admire or that played a big role in your development?
I can name two for me. So Frank Vitagliano and Kevin Gilroy, both for different reasons, but at the time that things were really changing from it, I think the first inflection point for me that I remember in terms of changing in the PC business, right, when Dell entered the marketplace with build to order, and then you take a look at everybody that was trying to do final assembly and all these different things that were happening, from a PC business. Those two individuals were probably the two that I looked to then to kind of gauge of what was going on in the industry, and were really partner advocates. And I think for me, I learned how to be a partner advocate by the way that they showed up every day. So.
Yeah, I think the other thing is, Frank came from that Dave Boucher tree. And when you look outside in the industry, there's a ton of channel chiefs and senior executives and CEOs that came from that IBM 80s, 90s David Boucher tree. Frank was a product of that, but there were several other guys like Ross Venuti and Greg Davis and Mark Ensweiler, a whole bunch of folks that came out of that.
Steve, you want to pick up?
Yeah, guys, I just wanted to get you to talk a little bit about what's the biggest business model you've made in the course of your career, and this can go for the vendors and playing too, right? And how did you cross that chasm? And talk about, how it allowed you to make more money. When I say the biggest business model change, what allowed you to drive more revenue and profits? And what were the investments you made to get there? Start it off, Jason.
Yes, I think for us, it's been less cataclysmic shifts and more incremental changes along the way, right, that have led us to where we are today. I mean, we were in the first MSP that I was a co-owner in, we were really, born into the managed services recurring revenue model, right? So we were never really a time and materials shop. But so oftentimes you hear people say, well, you got to listen to the customer, you got to listen to the customer. Sometimes I don't know if we poll our customers well enough. And that's one thing we've done really well is assess where we're at with our clients, what's working, what's not working, what could we be doing better, what are we not offering that we should be offering. And then we kind of reverse engineer our service delivery and the way we package and price and go to market with our offerings. And so certain things, that I think of in our business is really just, when we listen to our customers, and onboarding is a problem, right? If you don't onboard your customers appropriately, then you've really lost that customer relationship right there. So we've done things to enhance that process. And then the QBR process, right? Driving more business analytics. We're using some really cool tech around employee productivity monitoring so that we're offering HR data-driven insights, something new to the client. They don't just care about the blinky lights in the IT closet anymore. So those are, again, for us, it's been about asking the customer and responding and building that into our offerings.
Yeah, and Steve, I would say that here and now really is probably one of the biggest business model shifts that are happening today, right? I mean, the fact that customers are moving to consumption models or demanding consumption models or as a service models, and to really tag on to what Jason said, from the vendor point of view, we are making major changes right in our businesses today, and so not only we know that you are, the trusted advisors today, right? In the end, Blaine talked about in the, the old days, it was really a vendor franchise model, and you were, again, a Novell, partner or an IBM partner, HP partner. And really in today's world, the fact that customers are really looking for that single trusted advisor. Even the size of the HPE portfolio really can't meet, I shouldn't say that, but, it needs augmentation by partners, right, in order to support the customer's needs. So we're really working closely with partners to understand how they're managing customer life cycles today as opposed to project-based, sales. It's all about customer lifecycle management. And so we're having to make changes. We just announced a new partner program, HP Partner Ready Vantage, to support that shift to as-a-service business, where we're recognizing, acknowledging, customer success practices, professional services practices, et cetera, because it's important for us to acknowledge the services that the partners are providing today and how are we able to support that, right? So it's beyond just the technology. It's really about that customer life cycle.
I'll come from a different angle just because we're sitting here talking about 40 years. So in my time, I remember the 2 inflection points that really changed our business model. We were in Novell Platinum, so we had to abandon that at some point in time and move over to the world of Windows NT. So I think that we had to change how we were modeling, how we were selling. And of course, you can't sit up here without talking about just the migration to the cloud. I think that affected everyone's modeling, when Microsoft came out with BPOS as you go out there, and then moved out to Office 365 and Azure. It changed our whole thinking of how we were going to go package this up, how we were actually going to keep making money, and in the back of our minds thinking about, is Microsoft going to just pull the rug on us? And in reality, we're making more money now than we ever were, and it is all about service and having the client understand the cloud, because the good and the bad is it's complex. I don't think most customers could walk into an Azure calculator today and come up with a solution. So they do require and need us to go out there versus us just, competing with the online people at this point.
Everything you guys are talking about is that evolution of the channel. The channel is the one consistent changing organization. I think one thing for me is the role distribution's played, because I had an early role at IBM when we launched the distribution channel. And you watch how it evolved when software came in, everybody declared that distribution was dead. When we look at what they're doing with the distributors investing billions of dollars into their cloud marketplaces and competing directly with, and cooperating directly with Amazon and AWS and Google, that's an example of, that's an evolution from the late 80s, and it's still evolving. We still can't really say, what is distribution going to look like 5 years from now? If they don't change, they don't survive. And the channels had that same gun to their head the entire time I've been in the channel, is if you don't change, you don't survive.
Blaine, that's a good one, and I'd love to get you guys to talk about this, because it seems like the business models are changing faster than ever. Everything's moving so fast today. You see it at this show. Security breaches, the technology you need to know, consolidation, you need to scale up or be highly specialized and be agile. What's the cultural traits that you need to be successful in this fast-paced channel today?
That's a good question. I think the way I look at it from our standpoint is we're nothing without our staff, without our employees, without the men and women who turn wrenches in our client environments, right? And so there was a really good breakout session yesterday. A gentleman was talking about retention, right, and how to retain your employees. And I think we've evolved our business tremendously in terms of offering big company benefits, a really aggressive 401k match, paying for insurance benefits, flex scheduling, time off whenever you want it type of things, which really endears our staff to us and our mission. And on the other hand, when we talk about culture, right, we just went through the greatest pandemic, the greatest black swan event in 100 years that this world has seen. And so there's a lot of hero worship going on in our culture, right? Nurses, doctors, frontline workers, police, firemen. What about for us? What about for the people in the audience? Give yourselves a hand, because you kept the world going during the pandemic, right? And so that's what we drive with our staff, is we are the corporate first responders. We are the ones they call when crap hits the fan and when things aren't working. And when they start to buy into that and you're taking care of them, you can really adjust and navigate any of the changing winds in the business.
I don't know how to follow that, but I will say that culturally, when you talk about culturally, I'd say you need to, for myself, this is what I do because I have 2 millennials, right, 2 kids that are millennials, is spend time talking to them about how they see the world. Because it has been, for me, the discussions with them and the shift of the mindset of, it's funny because my daughter, it's one of those things where somebody asked her a question, we were on a panel together, and somebody asked her a question of, what advice would you give to your mother, you know, or your mother's generation? And she said, to say that, you know, don't say, this is the way we've always done it, right? Because you can't rely on history. I mean, look at what's happening now. I mean, from a pandemic perspective, nothing is normal. The weather's not normal now. You can't predict the weather. It's just like the recession. You can't predict what's going on. Things are different. And so you have to be flexible. You have to be agile. You have to really think about, look, I've been dealt, you know, this hand of cards. I just need to figure out how to make the best hand out of it. You know, it's never going to be perfect. So I think it's really about acting fast and, you know, being agile.
And I think understanding the market on that part. I have, like your millennials, I have my 2 millennials, 2 of my 3 millennials that actually work for me in my company. So many times when we'll run events or we'll get together, you know, their friends know that they're going to be my market. Because we do have to stay on top and understand how they're thinking, what their purchasing power is, where they're going. And, you know, also during the pandemic, we did the same pieces. We went out there and we had to really flex and go into, you know, disaster mode, you know, keep up with that. And then a couple months into it, it was amazing how the channel came together. Yeah. All the vendors were going out there and offering us ways to go out, whether it was remote desktop or support or things along those lines. We looked back and we said, how could we help? What could we do? You know, I can't convert manufacturing into making hand sanitizer or help on vaccines. So we turned around and we actually worked with Microsoft and we really provided a lot of Teams training. I live in Fort Lauderdale, so Broward County Public Schools. Teachers were thrown back into their homes and forced to learn Teams. We must have trained over 600 teachers that were there. We went out and ran how to run these events online. And I wanted to make sure that our employees were part of it. You know, our help desk every day at 10:30 would start deciding what lunch they would order. So when we were remote, we'd go out there and we'd do the same kind of thing, and I'd order in lunch for them for different things. They all know that I'm a huge sports fan, so we'd do, you know, Miami Heat watch parties via Zoom and make sure that everybody felt that we were there. And we continued this back. Believe it or not, only about 30% of our employees are back to work. They really worked great remote, and we've really worked to support that and still keep up with those little things just to help with culture.
I will say,
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I will say that corporate responsibility or social responsibility and sustainability are, I think, really important to the future. And because we're on the topic of millennials, right? If you think about the future purchasers or the future, you know, customers of the world, that's really important to them. So I think that's something that whether it's part of you know, if it's not part of your culture today, you need to make it part of your culture from a company perspective.
We had Chuck Robbins on stage at Bob last year, and he was talking about, it's true for all of us, but especially the last 2 generations we're dealing with, they really want to work for a company that has a heart.
Yep.
And he made it very clear when you think about your ESG initiatives. To me, the culture is the community. As a vendor, I was part of this community that the channel company had provided me. Now that I'm on this side of the fence and see how those communities come together and just see the impact that we can have. Women of the Channel is a great example. Never went to a Women of the Channel event until I came to this side of the fence. But I sat there and my wife came with me the first time and I watched the interaction of these 1,100 women in New York and just the energy and the connection they were making. That sense of community, we just launched our inclusive leadership community, and we've got other ones, but that, to me, that really is a cultural element of what we are.
How has the vendor approach to the channel changed over this 40 years? Kind of looking at you, Donna. From the vendor perspective, how the vendor thinks about the channel.
Yeah, no, I think Blaine said it earlier that I think the vendor community has always looked at the channel community as an extension of their sales force, right? And I have to be honest, when I hear those words today, like, I bristle over it because it's completely shifted. I mean, when we think about the fact that customers ultimately are looking to buy as a service, they need somebody who is going to drive business outcomes for them. And a vendor can't approach it from a pure technology perspective. We certainly can provide offerings to the market. But again, partners have to become trusted advisors. And quite honestly, customers will look for a partner to be their trusted advisor, and then for the partners to build that ecosystem behind them, whether that's other partners, right, that are part of that ecosystem. And so from a vendor perspective, we have to take a look at the entire partner ecosystem as a whole and say, partners that specialize in particular areas of services or particular verticals. And so we have to become we have to provide more specialized application, right? So what do we do to help you in this particular vertical? So for us, what's happening is, I'd say in general from a vendor community, is number one, having to shift our legacy programs and things that we have relied on for the last 20, 30 years. And we have to think about, flip that upside down and start to think about it from a partner's point of view with the customer, right? And how are we enabling our partners to provide more services when it doesn't mean a direct link to a product purchase? So that's how we become more valuable, I believe. You guys don't have to say that, yes or no, but how we become more valuable and working with our partners, that really enables that entire customer experience. So it's quite a big shift for us, quite honestly.
You hit the nail right on the head there. For us as I'll call it a small MSP, I want to be the best that I can be with my key vendors. So I'm reaching out to them and I want to know if there's a local person. I want to be the best at whatever certifications I need. I want everyone to know, in that team who we are, because you're right, the best referrals come out from the vendors at that point. And if they don't know about you, how are they going to find you? And especially if you're a small MSP out there. We go out there, we knock on all those doors, we ask the questions, we go out there, and we really do want to put some skin in the game and differentiate ourselves.
And I would say, by the way, the biggest probably changes, to be honest, is the partner's brand is more important than our brand today. Yeah. So that, I think, is, I think if vendors aren't thinking that way, you have to start thinking that way.
That's a really good point. I was going to go there as well, Donna. When I think of the shift, it's been all around trust, right? And when you look at many of the vendors that you're going to interact with at this show and down at the Solutions Pavilion, many of them, it's a channel-led sales model, right? With the channel, us being a principal-led selling model, right? And it's largely driven not by features and benefits, but by use case and outcomes and so forth. And so when you look at a lot of those partners in that room, I mean, a few that come to mind are companies like ConnectWise and Kaseya and Datto and LionGuard and, a lot of these companies that don't really have a brand or an image direct to the end user market. Their brand is to us. And so that trust is there, because when you go back 20 years ago, you always had to worry about people kind of vendors skirting around you and going direct to the customer because they didn't trust that the partner can get it done. And I'll close with this kind of, again, another feather in the cap of the channel company. Think back a couple of years ago, Jen, of course, you and Steve will remember when Dell decided they were going to go direct, and we were all like, yeah, right. Or when they were going to go indirect, right? That they were going to really build out the model. And what happened? You guys had a series of town halls over 2 or 3 years. Michael Dell came, he showed up. Frankie V was a big part of bridging that gap. And now you look, we don't see Dell as that threat anymore in terms of direct sales, or not nearly as much. And so that's really the shift we've seen. Same with, we were talking backstage, right, about Meg Whitman and all that she poured in when you guys went through the tectonic change, which was separating HP into 2 different companies. She came to the channel company events. She answered questions, really tough questions, I remember. I mean, she got, same with Dell. I think I even slaughtered him on a question, right? But that's what it's been. It's really been trust-enabled, partner-led, and I dig it.
And they were both at the same event.
I love my job because I get the opportunity to talk to hundreds of partners and hundreds of vendors and see the industry from a different perch. I think one of the biggest changes for me is there's very few vendors that really don't see the value of the channel. Some of them may not understand it or they're in an evolution, but if you went back 5, 7, 10 years ago, there were a lot of vendors that dismissed the channel out of hand. I kind of feel like we should have an immemorial wall of all the guys who dismissed the channel and didn't make it. But in my conversations, that's becoming farther and farther away. They understand the channel's value. They don't always know how to get it out and extract it.
Yeah.
But they do not think of the channel the way they did 5, 7, 10 years ago.
That's true even in the startups, I think, because
Yeah.
a while you'd see them and they'd say, well, we're going to come to market direct first, and then we'll build up the business use case, and then we'll go to the channel. And now there's a lot more startup companies that come out right out of the gate, not only channel, but 100% channel.
We've talked to several PE firms that have made acquisitions or were thinking of making acquisitions, and they start with what's the strength of their channel. And some of them will come to us and say, tell us about this vendor's channel because we're buying them specifically because we think they're strong in the channel. That's unique.
Yeah. Steve, why don't we transition to talk about the future?
Yeah, guys, this is really exciting because the thing about CRN, it's thought leadership and where the channel needs to go, and it's so exciting to come to these events because you get that. Can you guys talk a little bit about what's the next big business model change you see for the partners? And Jason, you can start. You have this really big data driven productivity payback model you're looking at, and Donna, you're looking at business outcome driven things. So can you guys just hammer that home, how fast what you're doing in terms of to meet the next evolution?
Yeah, I think for us, again, I said it before, it's really a continued progression towards the ascension to that summit, right? To that largest mind share we can get with our clients, that truly trusted advisor. And that's kind of a cliche that gets thrown around, but again, when you think about it, I mean, when you look at the cybersecurity landscape, right, and you look at the evolving threat vectors, right, and you look at all the countermeasures that we have in place, and now cyber insurance is coming into that, and people are really, they're checking a box, I got a cyber insurance policy, but then in reality, they don't realize the exposure they open themselves up to just by buying the policy, right? And the obligations that they have in their environment. And they don't know this. And it's our job to educate them and inform them. And the same goes with what we're doing in our partnership with ProtoScore in this EPM movement, right? This shift to the workplace of the future, right? That's been started a couple years ago. This idea of workplace of the future, but then the pandemic just, lit that on fire, right? And sent everybody home. And now people are having problems bringing people back in. So, I thought to myself, what if I could walk into an executive's office and I'm offering him insights into, how he can get better employee engagement, how he can attract and retain talent, how frankly, he can reduce attrit in his business, how he can get better technology adoption, how he can do better with spatial planning, right? And so that's what it is. I mean, as an industry, and I'll talk a lot more about it at NextGen at my presentation, but, we should be pushing towards $250, $300 an all-in seat price. If you're not selling at $175 or $200 today, you're already behind the eight ball and you're falling behind, right? So when I go in, if you're in my marketplace, right, and you're coming in and you're talking about, hey, we're going to tell you how many tickets you got each month and how quickly we resolve the tickets, you're going to get smoked from my presentation. I'm just telling you. So that's how we're trying to stay on top of things.
Love it.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest changes, and we talked a little about this backstage about data, right? And the fact that one thing to create data, another to store it, but now it's all about analyzing it and leveraging it and driving business outcomes based on it, and then selling services based on the ability to drive those business outcomes, right? And so, it's interesting because I have been asking, partners in general, how many of your customers today are asking to either create an SOW or pay you based on the business outcomes of what you deliver, as opposed to implementing infrastructure, right? And we are starting to see a bit of that shift. It's happening in the large SI community today, but I imagine it will start to trickle down, right? So I think, first of all, thinking about things in terms of driving business outcomes, part of it is we need to help enable that as vendors in identifying how our portfolio enables those business outcomes and how you can drive a service on that. And so that is really, I think, the big shift that's happening from a vendor perspective. But at the same time, from a solution provider or MSP perspective, it's about how are you starting to think about creating those capabilities to demonstrate to your customers, whether it's your dashboard, we talked about that earlier, that enable them to actually see those tangible business outcomes. So to me, those are the big kind of business model shifts that are happening. And now's the time to make the investment to get there, right?
We're focusing a lot on the customer experience. Service delivery is everything, where we think we've got close to the plateau of that trusted advisor. We wanted to be the trusted source. So we're also trying to develop new buying personas so that we can understand the new customer that's coming in. Not interested in the feeds and speeds. They're really just looking for a solution. And we want our sales team to understand that. So really it's just analyzing a little deeper, and they don't want to hear, it's these licenses, it's this. They know it's a pay-as-you-go service, and just making sure that their experience is the best experience.
I want to say too quickly before Blaine weighs in too, because I'd love your thoughts on this. I think so often we think that the CEO, their primary responsibility is really about profit. And at the end of the day, it's not. It's really about managing and mitigating risk. And that's why we've been able to ascend so high in that trusted advisor ecosystem, right? Because better than any of those other guys, we help them manage risk, right? And you being the dynamic leader of the channel company and all the acquisitions, I don't know if you have any thoughts on that too, Blaine.
No, I think you've got to take the approach that you're running your business. And we're a medium-sized business, and I have that perspective of a CEO lens that you guys sit to, but you've got to change the way you do business. It's not about speeds and feeds. I had a vendor, I won't name them because they're in the audience, offer me up a free product. And I really couldn't do it because we're so tightly interwoven with our partner that if he can't support it, it's of no value even if it's free. So it's a change in our mindset. It's really a shift that says this is a partnership that they are an extension of my IT organization, and they really are the basis for all of the support, the customer and employee experience that my team has. I'll say one other thing that I think is a major shift. First of all of you guys talked about business models, business shifts. You didn't talk about technology. I think that's one of the major things we're looking at is the partners looking at running their businesses. A specific one, because we have an agency we see a lot of it, is partners are so much more marketing tuned to their customer set. They know how to digitally market. They know how to use data in that shift. And if you're not, thoughtfully marketing yourself and building your brand, that's a significant miss on your part. And if you went back even a few years ago, marketing at a medium to small partner wasn't even a thing. Maybe my, my daughter did it. Maybe somebody picked it up as a second. I had a CFO who told me they were the CMO at the same time. But now the focus that the partners have on building their brand and building their business is different. It's not about just the technology. It's about who are my customers and what's the experience they have.
That's a good note to end on. Thank you, everyone, for being up here and talking with me. I would also like to thank all of you, all of our readers, our loyal sources, all of the vendors and distributors that talk to us, spend the time to educate us on your mission and your message, and of course, support us. It's been a real treat, a real ride here. I always say one of the things that's so great about covering the channel from a journalistic standpoint is that we really get a chance to play an advocacy role. We really take that seriously at CRN. Again, our mission to really make sure that we're telling the stories that are relevant to you. So thanks for giving us the opportunity to do that. Before we go, we have a quick couple of things from the archive I wanted to share. This is a photo of Michael's first PC. What are we looking at here, Mike?
That is a leading edge computer. Yes, the company leading edge, a Maynard backup on there. And behind the Michael's first PC is one of the original laser jets that are there. You can make out the floppy disks that are up on the...
So the channel company, we're in better shape now than we've ever been, but even back in the day, we looked pretty good.
Notice the date. Exactly 4 years ago.
Exactly. Wow. Thanks, everybody. Thank you.
That's great.